Just waiting.
All right.
Give it like until there's a viewer or two on your in mind, then we're ready to go.
Hey, let's just say it. It's all right.
Nah, let's. I got two people. Okay, we're here. Are you there? Okay, you can go.
Welcome to Africa as a Country Live, episode 4, and this is the sports episode. We're going to try to talk about a few
sports special
sporting competitions that are happening around the world right now.
Should I cue that music just for fun? This is like classic when you do a sports special. It's like the 80s when you're growing up in like some third world country that the British people are like ruling or something, or like had ruled. Then this is just sort of like
decolonize the sports music.
We could play something like, I don't know, like who's the guy? I think he went to Parliament as an ANC MP in South Africa, Ringo Bandlingozi, something like that. We'll end with that. We'll end with a Ringo.
All right.
Just to like decolonize. Anyway, enough of this. You can do the proper intro.
All right, so we're going to try to talk about a few different tournaments today. We're going to do Cricket World Cup,
yes.
Women's World Cup, African Cup of Nations.
I think that's the big ones, yeah.
Those are the three.
Yeah.
And I think
we could mention, like, if we have energy, we can talk a little bit about the Copa América, which I think starts later this month, and also the what's known here as the Copa Oro or the Gold Cup. Apparently, you could have qualified to play in that tournament, which is like CONCACAF, which is the North America, Central America, and the Caribbean.
Yeah.
It's a very predictable tournament. Mexico, United States, maybe Costa Rica, sometimes Jamaica, but that's it. But anyway, let's deal with. Should we?
First, I want to say that I used to
disclaimer.
I used to be into sports. I played soccer growing up, all the way through high school. I was a left defender. I did all right.
I should put my bona fides.
I have my highlight tape that I'm trying to dig up, so I can show you later. But I actually had a whole highlight tape. I attended a Women's World Cup game in 1999 in Chicago, but for recent years, that's 20 years ago now. But in recent years, I haven't followed it as closely. So I'm gonna have a lot of questions, and I hope you have the answers.
I will say this: I actually did play football. It sounds terrible for some people to hear, but I did play competitive soccer. I was terrible at it. I played for a team in Cape Town when I was when I was a teenager. I was really terrible at sports. I'll be honest. I played, like in the park or something, but the only competitive football I played was for a team called Parktown United in Cape Town. They played in Athlone, which is a neighborhood. It's like 20 minutes from the center of the city, predominantly colored township. It's like Athlone, Langa, Hedefeld, Guguletu, etc. Anyway, and a lot of the teams came from those different areas. But this is after apartheid, so it was actually interesting because it was kind of a non-racial league. Like it wasn't like you only played against. I mean, I know people who know South Africa. It's very segregated, but you played against dudes from Guguletu. You played against Hedefeld. So it's almost like. Another time we'll discuss racial politics or politics of blackness in South Africa. These terms like Biko black African, colored black, whatever.
Well, we'll see what comes up.
Yeah, but anyway, I played that kind of soccer, and I want to read this because I think this is really important. At the end of last month, there were this group of dudes. They were talking about. It was the birthday of James Matthews, who's a very famous South African black consciousness poet from that neighborhood, from Athlone, and. I put up an old post, a film review by Rustem Kozayan. I don't know if he ever watches this. South African poet, very very good South African poet. And I put up just reshared on his birthday. I made a thread. You can go on our Twitter account. You'll see it with photos of kind of the career and the impact of James Matthews. And one person retweeted it and then tagged my own personal account _Sean Jacobs. And he said, his name is Jermaine Craig. At one point he was the editor of the Argus newspaper, which is an afternoon newspaper that's part of independent newspaper in South Africa. And he commented to another guy and said, talking about Africa as a country, little known fact is that its founder _Sean Jacobs was a footballer for our neighbors Parktown. often played against him for Silver Spurs.
Remember that.
Somebody put it on record that I once played football. He was a much... Okay, then he puts this little qualifier. Here comes the qualifier, which I don't want to read, but I'm going to read anyway. He said... He was a much better academic, though, and he put like a smiley face with pink cheeks, and then he like gassed me up a bunch. Which should we read that gas part? Yeah. Do you want to read the gassing part? He gassed me up.
He's leaving a huge legacy for all of us in the States.
I had to read because I know that's just a bunch of
double high five.
Double high fives. But anyway, just like have somebody recognize that you once played the game, especially if you care, because a lot of people. This is a small point that I have. I'm a fan. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm a fan of football. I really enjoy it. I actually watched the final of the Champions League with Tony Karan. I hope Tony's watching. Tony Karan works for Al Jazeera, top man. Him and I teach a class at the new school on football. We used to teach it on soccer and politics. Now it's just called global sports and politics. Tony was here. A visitor from Belgium, Christophe Vogel, who also writes for Africa as a Country, more love, and then Matthew Smith, who's from Jamaica. He arrived, and by the end of the game. But the story about this is, as I'm saying, I'm like as much as I talk about sports, also not enough, but I'm a real fan because what happened was near the end they were like, "Yo, sit down," and I was like, Liverpool was obviously winning comfortably. It was a kind of a boring match. I'm a Liverpool fan. I didn't say that. I hadn't said that yet. And I was literally pacing around the room and wanting to leave the room, and they just looked at me like... I mean, Tony's even worse than me, I think, when it comes to watching football. But basically, they were just like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you sit down? And I was really getting... My body was reacting to the game. So I care about sports. I want to point that out. It's not... I don't just want to intellectualize it. It's something that I've...
You shot at the TV.
Yeah, I have pleasure. I have pleasure in sport. And, I support Liverpool. Do you have a favorite team?
My older brother, when I was young, he gave me a Newcastle jersey. So through thick and thin, I've been a Newcastle fan.
What a choice.
I'm not fair weather. Even when we get relegated from time to time, I stay
That's a good attitude. Yep. Yes.
I'm not one of these guys that just, supports Manchester United.
Right.
Only in the years that they win or something.
Like the little kids, everybody knows, everybody's a Messi supporter.
Yeah,
Barcelona.
Actually, Alan Shearer.
About that, I was just going to say, isn't that the time that Newcastle, under Kevin Keegan, they went for the title, but they lost out in the end to Man United under Alex Ferguson. Apparently, I think Kevin Keegan, I'm not even sure if he had like a heart attack or panic attack.
Ever since I've been watching, we haven't been up there in the rankings so far to be able to contest the championship. So I'm gonna have to say.
But they currently they're doing well. I think they managed to stay up, and we'll see what they do next season. Should we quickly just at least acknowledge how people who are watching, so it doesn't look like we're forgetting them.
We're not forgetting them at all. We have Jessica Blatt.
We don't know her. We did not know who that is. That's a good. She's actually a viewer that's been with us for a while. Yeah.
Formerly known as Priest Owino. Saying very cool vibe. I like that.
Right.
So, yeah, that's what I got.
Excellent. So that's great. I've noticed I wanted to shout out some people watching via Periscope, but I think if they make hearts and stuff, we can see them. So the Periscope viewers, Twitter Periscope viewers. If you want to shout us out. A couple of other things. We're going to put up all the episodes, all the episodes.
All of them. Hey, this is the fourth one.
all the episodes. We're going to put them on Mixcloud as audio files because not everybody has the time to watch a full 30, 40 odd minute read. Our longest episode is almost an hour, right?
55 minutes
55 minutes on Binyavanga. But we're going to put them on Mixcloud. And we're gonna also put at the end of this, we're gonna try and put these episodes also on YouTube, add a little stuff to it, like some graphics and make it nice. Anyway, so
no, we have to.
Yeah, I see. It says I'm here, recent Liverpool convert.
Recent, okay.
Okay, that's good. That's a good choice as a football fan.
My younger brother is also Liverpool.
I was hoping that person's name would pop up. So why don't we
dive in?
Right. Dive in. Let's dive
Can we do the Women's World Cup first?
We can do the Women's World Cup first because apparently you said you're an expert on that. So let's go on that first.
I've been watching these games for a while. So in this year's tournament, we have 3 African teams.
That's all we care about.
Out of how many teams?
Is it like 16? Isn't it? 24? There's 24 in the tournament, right?
So not such a great ratio. I don't know all the politics of how they select.
I think there is like...
Why are there so few?
Right. I think this has to do with, so similar to the men's World Cup, the women's World Cup, you get a number of places per continent. So that, it's like the way football's organized is by confederations. So you have UEFA, CAF, which is Africa, Oceania, CONMEBOL. My wife always says, like, how do you remember all this useless information? But you can't. You walk to the store, and on the way to the store, you forgot what you were supposed to buy. But CONMEBOL South America, CONCACAF Central, as we mentioned already, Central, North America, and the Caribbean, and Asia.
Yeah.
And each association gets a number of places. I'm just kind of going to it here.
Well, they must have, far different numbers of teams within their associations. How many teams can the Oceania group
These
have?
things have to do with history. So historically, I think the same with football. With men, I know the evolution of like places for the men's World Cup up until now. Remember, it was 32 teams, where they're now going to increase it to 48. But the way it works is it's weighted. Say weighted. Is that the way to say it? Like to weigh something.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's weighed by history. Who's dominated these things? Who set them up? Who dominated them? So if you take men's football, which I know a lot better, and this is a sad commentary on my knowledge of the women's game, but I think the same thing applies, and I think it's even worse in women's football. So for men's football, up until the 1966 World Cup, African teams had to play against. There was one slot for which an African and an Asian team had to play in a playoff to get into the World Cup.
That's crazy.
So Kwame Nkrumah, God bless him, he actually told the African teams to boycott the World Cup and not play in the World Cup until they were given automatic places in the World Cup. And I think they got 1 or 2 for the next World Cup in 1970 in Mexico.
2. Wow.
This is, I think, when Morocco went to the World Cup. And then subsequently the places kind of increased over time. And I'll get to that in a minute. So at the last World Cup, Africa had 5 places. If you host the World Cup, which you did in 2010, then we got 6. Now this is an important point. In 1974, there was a FIFA Congress, and at that FIFA Congress, a Brazilian guy called João Havelange became the president of FIFA. And what he did was, the way he got elected is, suddenly all these countries had become independent since the 1960s, because all countries have one vote to vote for the president. So suddenly Africa went from, I don't know, like say like 4 or 5 members to like 50.
Yeah.
Asia went the same way. So using like, if you want to call it like a set of inducements, it was like, oh, I'm going to build you stadiums. We are the third world. So they all voted for this guy from the third world. That's how Sepp Blatter was his deputy. And so over time, if you are like big on these third world countries, then you get elected to be president of FIFA. And so Havelange and of course Blatter and so on, to stay in power, they give concessions. You can host like all the junior World Cups in Nigeria or Malaysia or whatever, and we'll give you more places at the World Cup.
In the men's World Cup.
In the men's World Cup.
But
Women's World Cup, as I said, it feels like the 1950s. It's still dominated by the same group of countries. If you look at the rankings as to like who's going to win the World Cup, it's still between sort of like, I think it's Germany, France, the US. I have the list of the rankings here. Sweden. Like those are the countries that, like there's one country outside of that group. Well, it's Euro-American if you want. USA, Canada, Germany, France, England. Is Japan is the only team outside of that top grouping that
the main block.
And it's about resources. It's about who's running the leagues. Something like in men's football, where all the top leagues are in Europe. The top leagues for women's football are in Europe. Like the best African players, they play in Spain, they play mostly in Scandinavia in women's football, in Denmark, Norway, Sweden. The US had a league at a point, then that league was disbanded because they couldn't find enough sponsorship or stadiums. It didn't work out. They back trying to revive that league, the women's soccer league. Some of South Africa's best player, Tembi, gonna get her name in a minute, played in that league. She's now playing, there's the other part, China.
Okay.
So it's like, you either play in Europe or you play in China. But so those are the reasons. But you could see we have here like, the AFC, which is Asia, gets 5 teams. CONCACAF, which is the US, North America, they have Canada, Jamaica, United States. UEFA gets 9 places, which is same like in men's football.
Crazy.
CONMEBOL, which is South America, which is odd, they only get 3. Oceania gets 1.
Is it that odd though? It becomes a certain thing where it looks strange, but then, because of these political historical reasons,
it makes
it makes sense, but it doesn't make just sense.
It's not right. It's not right. I mean, like, of course, but we have to be honest, because of lack of infrastructure, lack of investment, lack of political will. Women's football on the African continent, it doesn't get the kind of support that you would, that men's football.
Sure, yeah. And even in the places that have more resources, women's sports have been underinvested in. The kind of political issues that have happened.
Lots of prejudices
within the actual infrastructures in terms of who's managing the teams, how much people are being paid.
Right.
These issues, policies around sexual assaults and how seriously they're taken. These things have not been taken, so seriously.
Also a stigma. There's also a stigma around women's sport. Like, if women play sports, then there's this kind of idea like, they're too masculine, because there's ideas about femininity, masculinity. There's people can Google it. There's a really good article from a while back. It made a big scene when it came out in the New York Times about homophobia in the Nigerian national team.
Oh.
I think at one point, like, the coach was trying to like exorcise, like, by praying for them.
Wow.
I might be wrong, but I think there was even like a coach beating players and as you know, in South Africa, where even though we have a very progressive constitution, there's increasing support for the women's team. They're known as Banyana, because the men are known as Bafana.
Yeah.
The boys, the girls. I don't know what's with the repeat thing. But even in South Africa, there's some football players, very good football, have been murdered as part of the homophobic attacks on lesbians in South Africa. So there's a lot of things, I think, that makes it that seems to make it easier in certain societies to play football as a woman, that Africans still have to fight with. Yeah. Etc. Yeah.
So social issues, things like Me Too movement, and the pay differences. These issues, I feel like, have been bubbling up, more recently now than they may have ever in the past. Not that they weren't being discussed at all, but is it a time with social media, with social outrage, where this tournament is going to be an opportunity to really address these things? For example, I looked up some of the statistics, let's say, for around pay.
Right. The
prize money for the winner in 2019 for the Women's World Cup is $30 million. For the Men's World Cup, it's $400 million.
Dear Lord. That's crazy.
And it's always
and this
been
is
like
not
that.
like women are worse football players. I mean, there's some really classic women football players that can can play as well as men, can take them on. Marta, the Brazilian, some of the American players like Mia Hamm. I mean, some person, hopefully not people watching this, but like there's a lot of people. I can play against her. Try. I've played just sort of in Brooklyn. Sometimes you play with, women soccer players that played at the college level. You have a pickup game with them. I mean, of course, I'm an old, slow person, but the skill level, like the way they ran rings around like males their same age. So there's just I think that this is like to do with, and also the game is so popular. In fact, the largest crowd at a football match was actually at the first unofficial Women's World Cup that was held in Mexico in 1970. So like there's the women's game, there's people like the sold out World Cups, the one in Canada, the last one that was in Canada, I think in this is now 2019, 2015. The tournament was in Canada. It was won by the US, right? Before that it was won by Japan. But like sold out, there's there's definitely support. There's it's commercially. That's usually not the first thing I think about. But it makes commercial sense to support women's football too. So it's a bizarre thing as to why this is not happening. I have to say though, I think like with the last World Cup in Canada, which I did watch from start to finish, I think you're gonna have a similar. I'm definitely watching this World Cup, and I know tons of people are gonna watch it. We are, as you said, it's after Me Too. It's a different time. Like it's a different way in which people are watching it, and it's not competing with the men's World Cup.
No,
which is sort of
They're
people's default. Yeah, they staggered it. It's an uneven year. So hopefully all those factors will contribute to a good World Cup. And women players there's some really excellent women players. I mean, I could mention some of the African players in a minute, but yeah, they're definitely excellent players that we can also look at. Yeah. But so in terms of like the African teams and how they're gonna do,
sure, yeah.
We have, as we said, we have 3 African teams.
We should post the games, by the way. when they're happening.
The listing, we'll put it on the YouTube video. But we got Cameroon, who's currently ranked at 46 in the world. That's the one team. Nigeria, which is the highest ranked African team, and South Africa, who's ranked just below Nigeria at 39. And in the last Women's African Cup of Nations, which is this is another small point that I think there's no it's not like the men's World Cup where people are playing tons and tons of rounds. Basically with the African, I don't know how the others get qualified, but for the Women's World Cup, the African teams play a women's African Nations Cup. They played it in Ghana, and the top 3 teams, the 2 finalists and the best, the 3rd place finisher.
Yeah,
they qualify for the World Cup. Okay. Yeah, so it's like you played a tournament, you won, and now you go to the World Cup. And in this last World Cup, Nigeria won the tournament, of course, as we know.
Which they've dominated.
Nigeria is crazy. Yeah, they've won 11 of it. 11 of the African Women's World Cups. Sorry, African Cup of Nations, Women's Cup of Nations. They've been in every World Cup since the first World Cup. And they've gone, I saw today, I read somewhere that they've gone to the quarterfinals. So they're incredible. This is the Cameroonians, this I think is their 2nd World Cup or 3rd World Cup. And they qualified for the last one and they qualified for this one. And then the South Africans, who went to the Olympics before, twice I think, this is their first World Cup, Women's World Cup the South Africa's gone to, and as I said, they lost to Nigeria in the final of the Women's African Cup of Nations. So Nigeria on paper is supposed to do the best of the African teams, but they're in a tough group, right? I don't know, I just saw on your screen that you had do you want to just talk about the groups? Yeah.
They have France, Norway, and Korea.
That's tough. That's a tough group. Norway is very good at women's football, so is France. China is historically better than Korea from teams from Asia.
Which South Africa has to play. Yeah,
so it would be interesting to see if Nigeria can if Nigeria can beat Norway and Korea.
We'll see.
Yeah, it'll be nice to watch them. They got one really good player whose name is Ashishat Osoala, who plays for FC Barcelona Femení, which I think is the women's team of FC Barcelona. A striker. I've watched recently. She usually comes on as a substitute. She actually came on as a substitute of the final against Olympique Lyon, which is the UEFA champions. So she didn't start the game, but she's an excellent player. She's been the African Player of the Year like at least 3 or 4 times. Last two years ago, she was the.
So you got to catch those Nigeria games.
Yeah, the Nigeria games are going to be nice. Also nice. They're going to have nice gear.
Yeah,
I just know that.
Put together a good
kit. That we won't mention. I know there are going to be websites who are going to make stories about the gear.
All right. Any more comments about the Women's World Cup?
Cameroon. We got to move on. Yeah, but just quickly, Cameroon.
Don't forget Cameroon.
You mentioned Cameroon quickly. Like I said, second time, lost to Nigeria. Cameroon is weird. I don't know, maybe it's because I think of like how their men's team play, and I sort of expect the women's team to play the same way. They can I think they went one time to the round of 16, in the Women's World Cup. I think they can either like suck us and play really well, or they can just sort of like fall apart.
Flop.
This is really a terrible thing. I know there's going to be people that are like, he's just repeating what Western Europeans when they talk about football. It's not that. I think it's like a weird thing. It has to do, again, when we go back, we talk about infrastructure, the way the game is managed. You know, it's also like it's a one-party state, and I think it filters down to the football, like how the football is often, it's not democratic, so I think you can often detect that in like how football gets organized and how the team plays and who gets picked. And like the other two African teams, they don't have a national league. These players are like all over the world. There's no national style.
They're not playing so many friendlies all the time.
You play in China, I play. I mean, all these African teams are the same. You play in China, I play in the US. There's no like, you know, they rarely play friendlies.
And so there may not be cohesiveness as much.
Right.
As a team and experience just playing other, you know, high-profile matches. So.
And this is where, just to end with our discussion about the Women's World Cup, this is why I think the South Africans could be interesting. There's a lot more investment in the national team, in the infrastructure around the national team. They appointed a local coach. I actually want to I hope she would one day watch this program. Desiree Ellis, she's from Cape Town, which is, you know, where Bernie Sanders' #1 fan is from. That's let that go.
We'll have another episode on politics.
Yeah. Desiree Ellis, great footballer. She actually played for South Africa, incredible local. I think she's from this one township. She's either from Mitchell's Plain or Hannibal Park. Maybe somebody can correct me by Googling it. But she's the national coach. The captain, Janine van Wyk, who's a defender, this blonde defender, really like strong, brilliant player. And then the other player that I want to mention, which I think is probably going to be one of the outstanding talents of this World Cup, is Thembi Kgatlana.
There you go.
From I got that right? From South Africa, striker, played here in the US. If you go on our Instagram account, we featured one of her goals when she like played here in the US, like one of those spectacular goals that she scored. And then, I want to bring this up because this is something that we can actually quickly just talk about. South Africa also has a player called Ode Fulutudilu, and I want to talk about this because I think this is actually for me the most interesting part of this World Cup, and mostly for South African, because I'm lazy. I should have written about this, but I know somebody else will, and then I lost my chance to write about this kind of stuff. I really want to write about this, but I just can't find the time. She was born in the DRC and came to South Africa as a refugee with her family and grew up in South Africa and played in mostly the leagues in Cape Town. And again, it's that sort of, I'm fascinated by Cape Town because I know, as I said at the start, very racially segregated, but then there's this, you know, when I played soccer there's always this way in which there was almost like a sort of Pan-African, mostly black, like just people of all kinds just playing football together, club football. She actually played mostly in a kind of a colored league.
Okay.
Where she played really well, was talented, people spotted her. I think she said it was like her like foster mom or somebody who promoted her to play soccer.
All right.
And she plays for South Africa. Now the reason I find this story interesting is, and I've written about this elsewhere, Song Kim Semang has actually written better about this, which is the notion of what is to be South African.
Yeah.
It's very limited. When it comes especially to like I think cricket has adapted to it, where they've had a Pakistani spinner in the national team, some players from India who play for South Africa. In rugby, there's a number of players who are originally from Zimbabwe playing the South African national team, and Beast, the guy everybody calls Beast, he's like the number 3 in the front of the scrum, he's from Zimbabwe. But you don't see that in football, in soccer. In soccer, historically, even under apartheid, players from Zimbabwe, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia have played in the South African club teams, the best club teams, Kaizer Chiefs, Pirates, but they've never, after the apartheid, they lived in South Africa forever. They were basically like just another South African, but they never were asked to play for the national team. Because the notion, which is a larger debate about xenophobia in Africa and who we are as South Africa, well, again I said us, who South Africans think that they are, in that you end up with a very limited understanding of being South African. And I've always felt that sports teams is going to be that space where we can begin to make new identities. And because the national soccer team is probably the team that most South Africans, that soccer, football is like that. The other sports, rugby and cricket, I mean, it's very sort of, it's become national, but who can play it, the cost of entry, who defines what is a good player, it's way more restrictive. And black people, even though the majority, they always feel like they have to try to get into those teams. So it's just not, it's national, but it's not really national. The aesthetics of it, the culture, it's very much inherited from sort of like white schools, Afrikaans schools for rugby, cricket, English schools. You have to go to those schools. But football is way more democratic, way more grassroots. You know what I'm saying? Like long histories of clubs. And xenophobia is experienced, it's a general phenomenon in South Africa, but it's very acute in, townships where people are rubbing up against each other. And I've always felt like if you use sports in this instance, like particularly soccer, you could change, like if there's a great, John Obi Mikel, who played for Chelsea.
They create heroes.
Yeah, he played for, his first big club was, he went from Nigeria to Cape Town and played for AIAC Cape Town. From there, I think he went to Norway or Denmark or something. And from there, that's when Man United and Chelsea fought over his signature. But imagine John Obi Mikel, in the midfield for South Africa. All those Zimbabweans in the midfield for South Africa's men's team. So I like that the South African women's team is leading the way in imagining identity. I think it's really cool, and it would be interesting to see if she's a star in this tournament.
The stakes are always higher for people in that position.
I'm rooting for, what's her name, Ode Fulutudilu. I think she's on Instagram. I think I follow her on Instagram also. I also follow Tembi. But I really wish that this works out, that she becomes a star, because I think it's really useful for the debate about South African national identity. And I've said this before, I think in a past episode, the notion of what is a South African is literally those people that were party to the conflict before 1994. If you arrived the day after 1994, you can never be a South African. You could live there, but whether you oppressed people, arrived on a boat, fled from somewhere, was the descendants of slaves, moved around.
A lot of people.
You are South African. You are South African. But if you arrive, even Lesotho migrants that came to work on the mines and were recruited, they could become South African. And in fact, laws were changed so that they could become, even apartheid made those laws so they could become South Africans. But after 1994, I have a feeling, you're a Congolese, you arrive on the 29th of April of 1994, you're not a South African.
So I hope that this are more or less desirable as well. But.
No, this is also part why race is part of it. But I feel like actually this is a good point. It's mostly this is reserved for Black Africans. This exclusion.
Certainly. So
we're hoping that for me, I really hope that she does well. I don't want to put a burden on her, but it would be really useful, just at a popular level for debates about identity if she does really well.
It's somebody on TV, somebody that's elevated as a public figure.
Beautiful. Yeah.
All right, we've been going for 30 minutes or so already.
I like that we went on the Women's World Cup.
That was good.
Not to be patronizing, but I really think that was cool that we spent so much time on the Women's World Cup, and we're going to give these men tournaments short shrift.
Equal pay.
This is what we are here for.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I think I did read that there was, for bonuses for the South African team, they were going to pay the same bonus to the women's team as to the men's team for qualifying at a certain advancing to a certain round.
And I'll say this, that also women's footballers have fought to not play on artificial pitches, I think during the World Cup in Canada they had a protest around that. There's been other spaces where women footballers have refused to play until they pay properly. I want to recommend for people following Women's World Cup, there is a podcast called Burn It All Down Pod. It has a bunch of people on there that are pretty whose work I like. Serene Ahmed, who's known on Twitter as Serene Footy Bedseeds, she's a Canadian person writes about sports. Mm-hmm. Soccer mostly. I think she's I don't know which fan. Is she a Barcelona fan? I can't remember. There's a historian on there, Brenda Elsey from what's the university out in Long Island? Hofstra. and two other people, Jessica Luther, who's a journalist, and Amira Rose Davis, who's like a sports historian. They're all part of this podcast. I know that I think the last episode is on the Women's World Cup, right? And I really recommend that podcast.
I'm posting it on the Facebook live stream right now.
Excellent for people who are interested in following women's sport, but like all those range of issues around women's sport and how we talk and engage with women's sport. It's great program. I definitely can recommend it.
So comment with the team that you think is going to win, that should win. We're going to try to share as many updates from the tournament as possible. We
will shout you out on Twitter, and include your Twitter handle. We'll definitely shout you out on Twitter if you put it on our Facebook page or even on Twitter.
If you have some Women's World Cup memories from the past to share.
Do you want me to talk about
you intro the cricket?
The cricket, okay.
The cricket, because I know nothing about it.
So let's move away from soccer for a minute. We got one other football/soccer topic we're going to cover, but let's cover the second topic, which is cricket. So currently there's this tournament called the Cricket World Cup, which is being held in England. The way cricket is organized and what is the World Cup, what tournament, blah, blah, is very confusing. But just quickly, the Cricket World Cup is organized by the international, the ICC. The
International Criminal Court.
No, the international. Wait, is it the International Cricket Council?
Okay.
And cricket is the World Cup is held every 4 years since the Men's World Cup for cricket. The first World Cup actually for cricket was a Women's World Cup for this kind of thing. I think it was in the early 70s, and then the men followed in 75. Was the first Men's Cricket World Cup. They held every 4 years, so they're kind of imitating the Men's Football World Cup, and the format has changed. The most important things to think about this is like the number of teams playing in it and the format. So it's more arbitrary than the chop and changing is way more than like a sport like soccer, where there's it's way more archaic and like the rules are applied, how the formats are applied. So 10 teams are playing in this.
Okay, just 10.
Just 10, which is an important thing to just quickly bookmark, and we'll move to these things quickly. They will each play each other once for a month.
Only once.
Yeah, so you remember there's 10 teams, each one play 9 games. This is a lot of cricket. Like every day almost there's a match.
They each play each other, okay.
Yeah, just once. At the end of it, the top 4 teams will go to the semifinals, and this is I think in early July. So a month from now, there'll be the semifinals. Then it'll be a knockout version, and then somebody will become the champion.
And are the games still taking forever, or do they?
No.
Did they
so
make the faster version now?
This is a good question. Your questions are good. The interesting thing about this is historically cricket is a long game. Was played over 3 days. Then it was made longer into 5 days. That's the original cricket with each team batting twice. Then in the 1970s is when they introduced, because cricket was losing viewers. I mean, because what am I watching? I mean, my dad can watch this stuff the whole 5 days and is super happy. But a lot of people don't like it. So in the 70s, right? Yeah. But even when I watched the 3-day, 5-day cricket when I was a kid. When I was living in South Africa, because that's what you do. It's part of the culture. It's not.
Turn on the radio
weird.
And just
you listen on the radio. Coming in from the duck pond and he bowls arm left over, and also the people commentating are fake English, trying to be English. Anyway, the teams are. So your question was the length of the game. Each team gets bowled 50 overs. So one innings, you bowled. There's 50 overs. Each over has 6 balls. So you put up a score, and then the other team has to knock it down. There's 11 players per team. You have to knock down 10 of the wickets to get the whole team out. So
wicket is like a bowling pin kind of thing.
Kind of 3 bowling pins behind the batsman. You can also catch somebody out. So it's if you're pitching in baseball.
But they don't have gloves or anything, right?
No, they do.
Oh, they do have gloves.
Only the wicket keeper has gloves.
Okay.
The batsman now bats with gloves on, with a protective helmet, with pads to protect themselves, because the ball is like a brick, like a little kind of a round red brick Now I think for this tournament you play like sometimes the ball might be pink, it might be white, might be yellow. So this is also another thing. So 50 overs, each team plays only once, bats only once. So there's going to be like 48 matches in total that these teams are going to play. They also play, so here's another innovation. Cricket is historically played in white, but in this one-day game,
white clothes.
In white clothes, yeah. You're not like it's only white people playing. No. So,
at a certain point, maybe.
At a certain point, it was at the beginning it was only white people, but then quickly what becomes eventually Pakistan, it eventually becomes India, the islands in the West Indies, even in South Africa, where a lot of people think that cricket is a white sport. Some of the earliest cricket clubs, some of them with rugby, we don't have time for that whole discussion today.
Another time, yeah.
They were not white. It was black teams with, black teams, like meaning like mostly on the coast, Xhosa speaking, Zulu speaking, colored players. They started some of the first clubs, some of the first associations. So it's not a white sport, but as we're going off again, they played in white. In the late 70s, keep me focused. In the late 70s, after that first World Cup that was played in white, so there was this thing in the late 70s, there's what's called the Kerry Packer saga. This was this guy, he was kind of like a Rupert Murdoch, he was Australian, and he decided to arrange for a tournament. If you know a little bit about cricket now, they have something called the IPL. So this is like the IPL of the 70s.
Sounds like a great capitalist project.
It was. So he brought the best players to Australia. They played these tournaments for a while. I think they played for a month in the summer. And they played in colorful uniforms. And so...
Instead of white, yeah.
Yeah, instead of white, because it looked good on TV. And, the West Indies plays in this color, England plays in that color. But it's too complicated to tell you, these weren't national teams. This was professional players saying they're from the West Indies playing in a tournament.
Yeah.
But in 1992, the Cricket World Cup changed to players playing in color. So they play in color, the different color uniforms. I think if you go to the ICC's website, ICC Cricket World Cup, you'll see each team is sort of color coded. They have different kinds of uniforms on. And that's one of the innovation to make the game interesting. And I also think, even though that's Kerry Packer who did it, a big influence on how the game is being played now, the style, the color, the sort of carnival atmosphere. It's mostly a consequence of how people play the game in India and in the West Indies. There's a great movie called Fire in Babylon, which shows you how the West Indies changed.
That's my one experience.
Cricket.
Experience.
And India actually, way more than everybody else, has really innovated cricket in the last couple of years with the introduction of what's called the Indian Professional League. There's some good documentaries and reality TV shows on Netflix about those competitions.
Playing the sport in a different way strategically.
Faster, they kind of cheerleaders. That apparently they import them. Just money, lots more money. Rich. Basically, it's a bit they came up. The IPL is almost like the NFL, but in India. A bunch of rich people each have a team. They draft players. So it's like the NFL and the way American sports where you draft and whatever, nobody gets relegated. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I actually think also that this World Cup with the 10 teams, everybody plays each other one. The top teams go. This is partly, I think, modeled on the IPL, which goes to a larger point because we got to move on quickly. India has also changed the way that cricket is played, the way it's organized, particularly the way it's organized. Whereas the game historically was dominated by the English and the Australians and the white South Africans, in terms of the organization of the game. And South Africa was kicked out and came back in the 90s. India now is in charge of cricket because the money for cricket is in India.
In terms of determining the rules,
determining the competitions, 14 teams played in the last World Cup. Okay. Now only 10. So they've excluded these smaller teams like Zimbabwe, Ireland, the Netherlands. Yeah, Afghanistan is in this World Cup, but that's probably also because India is developing the game there or something. So, but I want to make this point. We don't have time for it, but I would recommend Hassan Minhaj, the guy who used to be on the Daily Show with Trevor Noah, and then he got his own show on Netflix. I think it's called Patriot.
The Patriot Act.
Patriot Act, yeah. He has a really good episode about how India is changing world cricket that you can find on YouTube. We could just post it on the live, in the thread. But it's a great episode on how India's changed cricket, and I would really recommend that to people. There's been some really good journalism on this. But yeah, the key here is like this World Cup definitely also reflects like how the game has changed. And one other quick point, just in terms of on the field, as we said, we're also fans. We just don't want to talk about politics all day, and history and whatever, although we think it's always about that. What did CLR James say? Was it, what do they know of cricket or something? It's like this great quote, like that, like cricket is not just played on the field, it's all the stuff that's around it. That's actually also important. But anyway, in terms of like who could win this thing, England are the favorites to win the World Cup. India is second. People think that India is England's strongest competition. Australia, and then South Africa. The South Africans, for some bizarre reason, they've lost their first 3 matches. I don't know if they. I mean, they got 6 more.
They had some of their stars injured.
Yeah, Dale Steyn was a bowler. Well, you know your.
I mean, I had to read an article or two.
You've been checking, okay. And they did not include this guy called A.B. de Villiers, who's an incredible cricketer. Everybody knows how good he is. They decided not to include him. He's now a pop singer. We should probably post his music. No, we don't want to do that. They didn't include him in the team. He's like, I mean, if you can ask an Indian cricket fan or an Australian fan, they all know him. He's really incredible. But they have younger players coming through. Rabada, who's the fast bowler. Then they got some players like stalwarts, but they're getting old, like Dumani, who plays in IPL, and the former captain has Amla. We have a nice, beautiful article on the website about Amla's.
What about the West Indies now? Because they used to be really strong for some time.
The West Indies won. So the thing I didn't, and I know there's probably some viewer going like, what are they talking about? They obviously don't understand sports or cricket. But I want to mention this because I know somebody's going to point to this. The game, so there's the 5-day game.
Yeah.
There's the 50 over game. But there's also something called T20, 2020 cricket.
Okay.
Where you only play, so remember there's like 2 innings of unlimited overs until you declare. We don't have time to like explain that.
Whatever an over is, sure.
Right, six balls is an over.
Okay.
And you bat twice, that's the 5-day game. The 50 over game, which is this Cricket World Cup, right, where you bat once, only for 50 overs, and the other team bat once for 50 overs. There's also this thing called T20, which is this IPL thing that India introduced. Faster, more entertaining. I should have mentioned that whole thing, the IPL is 20 overs. So the West Indies, they won, I think, the last World Cup of that thing, the 2020. So they bat fast, like really hit hard. They have this guy called Chris Gale, who's an incredible batsman. That like he's like the star of that kind of game. I think he's been doing well. I need to catch up on all the games of this current. I've just seen a few. But I think he's been playing well for the West Indies in this tournament. But the West Indies are not ranked in this tournament. It's really Australia, England, India, South Africa a little bit, and New Zealand that are so it's the old powers of cricket are sort of, plus India, kind of still in charge of the game. It's a little ironic that we're back in where we were. Anyway, we should talk about our last thing, which is the.
Yeah, we're over 45 minutes.
Yeah, we gotta shut down the. Oh, there was one other thing that I really wanted to mention about cricket. There's also cricket, the fans, and identity. So as I said, India and the West Indies have changed like the character of cricket and how we think of cricket and how it's played, and they've made it more fun because, when it was with the English, the MCC, which is this club in England which made the rules and blah, blah, that's where Lords, like it's a certain idea of playing in white, acting in a certain way. And although there was like great black players, Indian players who went to the top of the game and played for the top English sides in what's called the county cricket, Yorkshire, blah, 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 Worcestershire. Famous South African from Cape Town, Basil de Oliveira,
sure.
Played for England, South Africa. Led to South Africa also. It's part of the reason South Africa got kicked out of international sports. But there is the question of identity, particularly in English cricket, where people like Pakistani immigrants, children of Pakistani immigrants, children of Indian immigrants, children of West Indians or Jamaicans, Trinidadians, whatever, screaming for the West Indians or Pakistan or whatever. So there's this thing in England that there was an infamous statement made by Norman Tebbit, who was a cabinet minister in Margaret Thatcher's government, and he had in 1990 he gave an interview to the LA Times when he said he came up with this thing what he called the people later call it the Tebbit test, the cricket test, and essentially he said a large proportion of Britain's Asian population failed to pass the cricket test. Which side do they cheer for? It's an interesting test. Are you still harking back to where you come from or where you are? So he was kind of mad that at the cricket, at like a tournament or whatever, or if Pakistan was touring in England or India was touring in England or West Indies was touring, these fans would shout for that team.
Yeah. Sounds like somebody should throw a milkshake on that guy. I mean, if you move from city to city, you might still support the city that you came from, even within the same state. So this is a non-argument.
It's a non-argument, but it's a racist argument. But the stuff is there. It smolders. You know, it's there. But the interesting thing is, and I would recommend this, Moeen Ali, who's in the World Cup playing for England. He just wrote a piece in the Guardian. Title is, I'm not going to dwell on it much. I grew up as an England fan, but it doesn't matter who you support. His family is originally from Pakistan. He grew up supporting England. As he said, his friends didn't support Pakistan. But then he said the other day in this article, I don't care. Like, that debate is over. It doesn't matter who you... He said something, it doesn't actually matter if someone who was born in the UK supports another country. If people have a strong affiliation to Pakistan, for example, through their roots, why can't they support them? Who cares, right? People following cricket is the important thing. And secondly, it's changing over time. When you get to the third and fourth generation, immigrant families and beyond, there will be more England supporters among them, maybe even the majority. I've had British agents tell me they support England because of Mir Adil Rashid, and that's great to hear. So it's like we're in a different time then. So that's another interesting thing also about when we were talking earlier about the South African immigrant story, that you have the similar kind of debates about cricket, but it's also moved on slightly.
Is there time for the last topic?
Yeah, I think
we're 50 minutes in. We can go for it.
You can go for it quickly.
All right, give us.
This is actually the tournament. I'll be honest. Of all these tournaments, the one tournament that I religiously watch, go crazy about, and actually, I've even had at some of these African Nations Cup, because it used to happen in January, in winter. It was a great thing when it's dark in the northern hemisphere. When I was living in South Africa, it was in summer.
The pace of work is a little slower.
Right, so watching all this football when you're in the northern hemisphere is like brilliant. But now this is the first time that the African Nations Cup will be in the summer.
Okay.
Yeah, in June and July.
And who's hosting?
Egypt. This is an interesting story. Cameroon was supposed to host, but Cameroon didn't have the infrastructure, wasn't ready. Then they also said because of the problems at Boko Haram in the north, and on the western border because of Nigeria, and then in the southern part of Cameroon, the crisis around democracy. Cameroon is a country where people speak both French and English, but historically, people who speak English have been discriminated against, and so they've been fighting for more political rights. Some would like to become independent, others would like proper democracy in Cameroon. So Cameroon was told no African Cup of Nations.
Were they still going for it though anyway?
They stay in the tournament.
They were advocating to host. It wasn't that they didn't want to host, but they weren't allowed to host by the association.
They weren't allowed to host by the association, and again, I don't think it's that clear cut. A lot of the stuff is politics. Sometimes they'll let you host even if your stuff is not ready. But in this case, maybe there was a lot of pressure. People went on social media. There were protest groups. CAF is based in Egypt. I don't know how easy it is to go and protest in front of the CAF building in Egypt. But it ended up with a vote between two other bids came from Egypt and South Africa. South Africa lost out to Egypt, something like 16-1 on the executive committee of CAF, which is also interesting because it tells you that like people are a little pissed at the South Africans.
That's a pretty clear decision.
For like various reasons. I think it may have to do with Morocco was denied the right to host the World Cup, and I think instead 2028 and it went to the US and Mexico, so that might have part of it. Other quick points on this, and then we'll move far from this, is some interesting things is Morocco I think, was banned from being part of the tournament, but they've been allowed to participate in football again because they refused to host the World Cup. There's the African Cup of Nations, because they said the people coming would bring Ebola. This did not. Uh-oh. This was just spurious. Yeah. This was in 2015, I think. But the fun stuff, which I don't have the full list of teams right in front of me, but this is going to be an interesting African Cup of Nations. Egypt are the favorites, of course. They've won the most African Cup of Nations in the history of the tournament. Cameroon are the defending champions. But if you look at the groups, if you scroll up a little bit, look there by it's just the matches. They don't give you the groups.
Yeah, let me look at the groups.
But in terms of the qualifying nations, the fun parts to mention is Madagascar will be in this Cup of Nations. It's very unusual.
Is it their first, or they just?
I think it might be their first. Uganda is back after a while.
Okay.
Guinea, which is Naby Keita's team, they're in the tournament. Mauritania is in the tournament. That's so a lot of countries, smaller countries that are surprises.
Is Lesotho there?
Just go back to
where's Lesotho?
I don't think that's happening. Where's the groups?
These are groups.
So we got in Group 1, Uganda. Zimbabwe is also back. Zimbabwe used to have great teams. We don't have the time to go into. I could tell a million stories about them. Burundi also is in the cup, small. So go
Guinea.
Put on more. Guinea, I'm not surprised. They had some good players a while back. Kenya's back in the tournament. That's interesting. Victor Wanyama from Tottenham, and keep scrolling. Tanzania. See, this is gonna be This is a fun, like a bunch of football nations that have rich histories of football.
Is Zambia not in there?
No, Zambia, I think.
Who has won?
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, Zambia won, but Zambia won one of those off years. Yeah. But yeah, Angola is back too. They also hosted the cup a while back. Benin is also back. So yeah, I mean, you could hear there are a lot of countries. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go deeper into this. Maybe we should spend, since we didn't give them the proper respect. But in any case, we're definitely going to be running a couple of pieces on the Women's World Cup, on the African Cup of Nations. By the end of the Cricket World Cup, we'll start running some cricket pieces. No, not the end, sort of halfway through it, because it's a whole month. And we also plan to run pieces on the Copa Oro and the Copa América, because one interesting thing about of those cups is how much players who because of history of slavery, immigration, etc. Some of those teams they could be you could watch Brazil and it looks like an African team. So there's so we want to write also about Colombia. If you look at a team like Colombia, almost 60% of the players are of African descent.
I mean, this is why I ask about West Indies in the cricket tournament.
Yeah.
Because it's players, many of whom are of African descent.
And when I was a kid, South Africa was banned from the cricket, and South Africa's cricket team, the default team was a white team. When I supported cricket, I mean, we couldn't see it mostly on TV, but you read about it in the paper. I loved the West Indies. I identified with the West Indies. Similarly with football, when I was a child, because South Africa's not playing in the World Cup, we're banned from FIFA, I think 76. From 76, well, they'd been suspended in the 60s, but they were banned in the late 70s. I like Brazil, because it looked like my neighbor is playing in the team.
Yeah.
So those are the way that how African most of these things are. Maybe is that the way to end it?
All right.
Is there any other thing that we wanted to tell people about? That's on the website.
Are there articles?
Yeah. We'll definitely want to, before we call it a day.
Let's see what's
Talk about Cameroon. If you go to the landing page, there's a very we'll put this when we do the YouTube version. It will come on the screen, but we'll have a religion and conflict in Cameroon, right? Good piece.
That one looks good. Climate conflict and capitalism fuel xenophobia in South Africa and beyond.
Oh, the one article that actually has done really well in the last couple of days is there's a new film on Frantz Fanon. I think it's called Frantz Fanon Yesterday, Today and Tomorrow, and it's by an Algerian filmmaker, and Bhakti Sringarpure, who's a professor of literature and an author of a new book that actually has a really good chapter on the politics of if you click on her name, we can get the title of the book, but it's called Cold War Assemblages, Decolonization to Digital, and there's a really good chapter in there about Fanon, Sankara, and Lumumba, like the early deaths.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she wrote that review, and it's been doing well this week. A lot of people are sharing.
I think you had invited her to speak at the New School recently about that very topic.
Exactly, there you go, yeah. And then there's another fun, more sort of older historical essay called When the President of the Rich Met the Black President, and it's an event from last year, from last year, but it's still useful to still talk about it.
Isn't it the son of the black president?
Well, the sort of symbolically, Macron went to the Shrine of Fela.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So
that
exactly that was kind of the link. But the story I think that she tells is just how much things have changed. Like, this is not the same. This is not Fela's Kalakuta. It's called the Africa Shrine. It's a different kind of sort of Fela that we're talking about. And I want to mention one last, and maybe if you want to mention one or two after that. I also want to mention two other articles. One I think that is useful for people to go check out is an article written by 4 young undergraduate students from Williams College, and they wrote a piece on Yenamar, which is the Senegalese youth movement. This was really fun to give them a space to write on the site, and I want to actually shout them out, and I want to tell them, and then they should watch the show. Seynabou Diop, Miles Cunningham, Dylan Milson, and Katya Kalizeva, and actually it's their professor Matt Seaton, who works in the Congo, who actually proposed the article, approached me, and I'm happy that they came to publish. And then the last article I would recommend, and I'll stop after that, is an article called The Complicated Political Legacy of Jerry Rawlings. Mm-hmm. Jerry Rawlings is a very interesting figure. He's still alive in Ghana. Nowadays he's like a meme. Like, it's like his wife's birthday and he's dancing with her, or he's directing traffic in the capital Accra, whatever. He's like an elder statesman, but he has a very complicated history in Ghana in that he led. So Nkrumah was overthrown in '66. And then subsequent to that, Ghana just went through like a series of military dictatorships. And then Rawlings overthrew this one dictatorship. He then sort of stepped back for a couple of months. He failed at this coup. He went to prison. He sort of, some people might say, sort of stepped back from politics, but he was in prison. And then the people who made another coup, kind of released him from prison, a bunch of junior officers, and then Rawlings had the former president and 2 other generals executed. And then when he came to power, he had judges murdered on the beach. I mean, and in Ghana, like, whereas people understand that he's an interesting and he basically helps found sort of leftist, sort of nationalist leftist party called the NDC, the National Democratic Congress, because the other party is called the MPP, that's sort of the more, economically right-wing party. So people associate him, working class people like him, they love his politics, but there's this other part of him that's complicated. Let's not call it complicated. He has this violent legacy. There's never been a truth commission in Ghana about that violence. The Rawlings has never been put on the spot to account for it. He sort of said, "Oh, that's about the moment." So we have a really nice essay by Jennifer Hart, who's a historian at Wayne State University, which is in Michigan, and she wrote a really interesting piece that I could recommend to people that can lead you to do other kinds of research. Yeah.
I would just mention there's a piece called Decolonizing the Museum, written about how Belgium's Africa Museum should address its colonial past, and I'm always fascinated by the politics of knowledge sharing, of presenting cultural objects from different parts of the world. how to handle these objects, who owns these objects,
right.
and how different spaces present knowledge and power through the way that they talk about history. So this is a chance to read more about that. We have other articles as well, related to museums, so check those out.
So that'd be it.
That's it.
I want to thank you for sticking with us. We're going to put all this... Wow, we went over an hour, bro.
I tried to warn you several times.
I feel like these episodes are going to become like an hour from overtime. Anyway,
we should
shut it down. Let's shut it down.
All right.
Is this our... What do I do at the end again? We're not going to
you do a dance.
It's
too late.
It's the end. It's too late. We want to say goodbye to people.